on October 16th, and then I signed up to work as a poll worker on November 3rd in a neighboring precinct. Would you like me to just give you an overview? Is that what
Yes,
I'm
please
doing?
do.
Okay. Well, I wrote in because I was aware of some irregularities that happened while I was a poll observer, and some different activity that I just felt uncomfortable with on election day. So I'll go ahead and start with what happened on the day that I was an observer. I was certified prior to that to be able to watch the two people that would be correcting the problematic ballots, which I guess are called, they were duplicates. When I walked into the room, they said, "I'm sorry, you can't be in here. You're going to go into another room." So I had to walk back to the front desk. I was escorted from that area back to the one area where the ballots were being separated from their envelope. And there were 30 to 32 people doing this, and there were probably 14 to 17 tables where there sat two people, and it was supposed to be a Democrat and a Republican. But not every table had a Democrat, but not every table had a Republican. So many of those tables had either a Libertarian or someone. There was one table with someone from the Green Party, and then there were 3 or 4 tables that had a Pima County worker at each of those tables. And they worked there at the elections office because when people came in from the building, they talked to them, and their conversations led me to believe things like, "Oh, did you leave your lunch? Did you bring lunch?" And they said, "No, it's over in my office. I'm going to go get it later." And she was back in 5 minutes. So similar conversations that went on with people who came in with those workers. I found it difficult for me to be able to oversee 32 people and what they were doing. I was able to catch a few of the things that were mistakes, or where ballots were taking them out of the envelopes and putting them on in a pile. And their job in this particular room was to watch, to make sure that the ballots were in one direction, and then they would double check the count of the ballot to the envelope I imagine to check it against the envelopes that came in. Each table was given a bin to put these in, and these bins would then go to another area where they were being stacked up to be tabulated starting on October 22nd. Many of these had mistakes, or they were written in pencil, and the workers, as I went around, had questions on, is this a good ballot, is this not? I was told by the gentleman that ushered me out of the place where I was supposed to be and said, "You aren't supposed to talk to anyone. You do not communicate with them. If you have an issue or you see an issue, you need to go to the supervisor," which is at the front of the table, front of the room. So as I saw things, as I went around to each table, I would go to the supervisor and I let her know, they don't know what to do with this ballot. It's in pencil or blah, blah, blah. And she'd say, "No, it's fine, it's fine." So as I went back to the tables where I saw these issues, under my breath, I said, "You need to go tell her. You need to go talk to them about this." And so many of them said, "What do I do with this ballot? It's in pencil." "Oh, it's fine, it'll go through." Or some people wrote over their ballot, over the little oval circle where they were supposed to mark, and those were put into a pile, a separate pile that would be called duplicates. Those duplicates then went to another table and were then taken to the room where I had been ushered out of. And there was one person, there was supposed to be a second person, and I said, is there a Republican at that table? Because I said, is there a Democrat and a Republican? And he said, well, we hope so. They have to, if they get here, but it'll just be, just be me, and hopefully a second person. So as I saw these ballots along this area that they marked as dupe, which I understood to stand for duplicates that were going to be fixed, they would then be taken to the table, to the room where I could see it was a glassed wall between us, and they were taken around. I didn't get to see that at that point. So when I left and the other person took over for me at 1 o'clock, I was there for 5 hours, I shared with her, I said, there's a lot of mistakes that are happening. They're not putting them in the order that they need to be in. So when they get folded, they become a duplicate because they can't be counted. The machine wasn't going to accept them, so it had to be then taken out of the pile and put into a duplicate. So when I left, the man who had ushered me out of the room, the first room, came clock and walked me straight over to the front desk. And he said, I hope everything went well. And I said, well, my concern is not necessarily where I was. It was hard for me to watch 32 people by myself. But more concerning is when these ballots were opened in the other room. And so to give you kind of a sense of how it worked is the ballots, however they were collected, is when these ballots were opened in the other room. And so to give you kind of a sense of how it worked is the ballots, however they were collected, were brought into an initial area of the Office of the Elections in Pima County. And in that room, the envelopes were then opened up and the signatures were checked. So then they would go through a double door where they were then sent to the room that I was in, where there were as many people as I explained before, trying to put them in an order, not necessarily of where they were from, but how they came in. So let's just say there were maybe 200, 250 per box, I'm not sure, but they came from different zip codes, different areas. It was whatever was mailed in. And then those were then put aside to be counted after the 22nd. My concern was the amount of ballots that were considered to be problematic that were then leaving the area that I was in, going to a room where there were only supposed to be 2 people, and not even sure there was 2 people. So that was my experience as an observer that I shared. I thought that was concerning. The other thing is when I came back to drop off my ballot, I had to drop it off outside, and there was no longer a police officer, and we found out that it was because our mayor, I live in Oro Valley, but the Tucson mayor wasn't allowing a police officer in front of the office anymore because it was upsetting to people to come and vote. And so I asked the man, I have to put my ballot out here. And he said, yes. So I said, how can I be sure someone isn't going to come and take this big box? And he said, no, we're watching it. And I said, who's you? And it was him and an elderly woman, 85. I don't know, and I'm sorry, meaning that she looked fragile, and I don't know how that could be protected. But I was a little concerned about that. It did make it in because when I checked my ballot, it was counted. But another question is how do we know who we voted for? That's a separate issue, but my point is that I don't know if my ballot actually has the people that I voted for. And, as I said, that's something separate from what I experienced there as an observer. As a poll worker, I was assigned to be a provisional ballot clerk, and that was on Election Day. And on that day, I had worked the primary in August, so I had an idea of who would come by, what the issues were. But this time, we had so many more people who needed a provisional ballot than we had been allotted to have in this one precinct. So that was concerning. But the people that came to me were, I had so many people who said, I didn't ask for a mail-in ballot. My wife isn't listed as an early ballot person, but I am. And those are the kind of people that we had a lot of. But secondly, I had people who had just moved here from other states, and most of them were from 2 apartment complexes. It was concerning because as we counted them, we probably had over 40 people who were in one apartment complex with one address who had moved here from other states that I began to turn away. I'd say, I don't know, within the hour, we were so busy that I took a break and went outside. And a gentleman with a yellow shirt said, hi, I'm with the Democratic Party. I'm here from California, and I'm here at this precinct specifically. I came from a Phoenix in Maricopa County, a precinct there, and we're here to help turn Arizona blue. And I don't know if just looking at me, he decided that he felt safe saying that to me. Maybe he assumed that I would be okay with that. I was shocked, and I said, oh, so what? He said, oh, I said, so what is your plan? What are you doing? And he said, well, I have lawyers on call to contact immediately if they don't allow them to vote, people to vote. And I said, well, there was a cutoff date. And he said, nope, every vote should count. So that made me nervous, of course, because I didn't know the law specifically, and I didn't want to do something that would cause a problem. So I thought, and he said, oh, I've only had to turn away, just a couple people were turned away, and I was able to help one person go back in. Well, that was probably sent to me because I was the provisional ballot clerk. So, of course, that was somebody that I had to take care of. So I went back in and thought, well, this is unusual. I'm concerned that somebody outside is going to be calling an attorney on something that I did because I said no. I sent somebody away and said, I'm sorry. I mean, if you don't have any proof that you've lived here or proof of having registered, I can't give you a ballot. So I called the recorder's office and explained this, and she said, well, you have to let them, all votes will count, but it's on a case-by-case basis. So at that point then, I had to call in to the recorder's office at every single ballot, and you have to understand, we ran out of spaces. So, I mean, we were at like 200. I'm sure you can check on this to be sure, but we were over the amount of ballots we had. But every time I called the recorder's office, they would ask me for their name and their date of birth. And when they would look that up, the person on the phone would say, okay, well, you can go ahead and let them vote. And so I was trying to find a constant that I could go by so that we could speed up the process. I mean, is it if they've moved here and they have this, and if they've moved here at a certain date, what is it? And they would not give me any constant. They just said, you just have to call for every case is different. So my concern and why I wrote in was that I had 2 people right after having a slew of people who came in from other states wanting to vote without having been registered and allowed to vote per the recorder's office. I then had someone come in from Maricopa County and one from Pinal County. It just happened right after. And each of them, when I called in, they said, nope, you're going to have them go back to Maricopa County, and the other one will have to go back to Pinal. And I said, well, how is that this person from Wisconsin and this person from Michigan and this person from Kentucky was able to do that? And she put me on hold for a second and then came back and said, well, it's just that we have their records more accurately than we have for Maricopa. We just can't, we're not able to process a Maricopa County ballot. So I had to send them away. But then as other people were coming through, it made me question why that was happening. So I asked them, do you have information that will prove that you are a resident, that I can verify that you are registered to vote here? And they would pull out their card, and it very clearly said that they were Republican. They had a voter card. So to test this theory out, I called the recorder's office and asked them, and they were denied. I had to deny them. And so I was in a frenzy trying to take care of all of these people, but I found that the discrepancy between every vote counts and only those that the recorder's office would allow was indicative of how they chose who they wanted to allow to vote. And there was a consistency in the voter preference that they chose. And that concerned me, because by the end of the night, which was at 8:15, after we counted all of the votes and they got put in the box and we were waiting for someone to come get them, I'm in the car and the election was already counted for Arizona, which I found appalling, first of all, after working 15 and a half hours taking in votes. But the experience really led me to believe that it was not, there should have been a system that we could have followed, because I understood that registered voters ended on a certain date and you couldn't come in and vote, but I was having to allow people to vote that literally had just moved here within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and they were all from two different, not all of them, I take that back. There was a large majority, a large percentage of people who had addresses from 2 apartment complexes. And the last thing is that I had a homeless man who came in with a registration. And the reason I know he's homeless is because I said, where do you live? And he said, he didn't speak English, and he said, I don't have a home, but when I was at a shelter, they registered me at the recorder's office. So when I called about it, and they said, well, he was probably registered to be in this precinct. I said, but he doesn't live here. And they go, well, it's anybody who was registered downtown can vote. And so I found that to be odd.